Morning, Joe. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We still have folks coming in. Do we have prayer requests for this morning? Do we have prayer requests this morning?
Yeah, Jimmy Cap's brother passed away.
Jimmy Cap's brother, Bill, passed away. Keep the Cap's family in your prayers. Keep our youth that went up to Colorado in our prayers. They're doing the VBS in Walsenburg. Yes, those people that were affected by the flooding down in the hill country, on the Brazos. So keep those families in your prayers. They're going to need a lot of them. So, anyone else?
Mark Lance, here if he preaches at Wheeler or Memphis, anyway, he's been a guest speaker and preacher here before. Grew up going to church with him and his family in Delaware. Anyway, he's been diagnosed with cancer recently, and it's not a very good outlook, it sounds.
Okay.
Anyway, he's asking for
Lance. Mark Lance was diagnosed with cancer. All right.
Former resident here in Sunray, Carol Bedwell, he lives in St. Augustine, Florida now. He's in the hospital with pneumonia.
Okay.
He's improving, but could use prayers.
Okay. What was the name?
Carol Bedwell.
Would you pray with me, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you, thanking you for everything that you do for us, Father, and everything that you're going to do for us. We're very thankful for this church, this building that we can come and worship your holy name, Father. I know a lot of places don't have that opportunity. Thank you for that, Father. We ask that you be with a few individuals that were listed this morning, Father. We ask that you be with Jim Capps and his family, with the passing of his brother, losing family members, hard and difficult. We ask that you be with those individuals as they grieve, Father. We ask that you be with our youth that is traveling in Colorado. Let them preach your word, Father, and that fall upon hungry ears. That way we may further your kingdom. We ask that you also be with the flood victims in and around Kerrville. A lot of individuals still missing. We ask that you give answers to those families in their time of struggle, Father. We also ask that you be with Mark Lance, family friend of Adam Ford, dealing with cancer, scary situation. We ask that you would be with doctors, nurses, overseeing him, and let him find an answer to that, Father. Lastly, we ask that you be with Carol Bevel, and being diagnosed with pneumonia, be with the doctors overseeing him, watch over him and comfort him. Father, we ask that you be with everyone that is teaching this morning, Father, that they preach your word and they preach according to your will. Father, thank you for the moisture that you sent us last night. We ask for more if it's according to your will. Forgive us when we fail you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We're in 1 Timothy chapter 5. We've got a lot to unpack here, and sometimes it's hard because when you go through teaching and you come in after, say, Jeff, sometimes it's a little intimidating because he writes such beautiful notes, and does such a great job. Thank you, Jeff, for your work. Chapter 5, he continues, Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's trying to help Timothy. This is basically Timothy's on-the-job training. He's out preaching and teaching in local congregations that Paul established sometime before. And Timothy has big shoes to fill. And so Paul is trying to encourage him to help people, but this isn't just about Timothy, Paul to Timothy. This is about, this is as much written to you and I as any other. It says in verse 1, do not sharply rebuke an older man, but appeal to him as a father, to the younger men as brothers. Now, there are times in the church that we have to deal with problems. What kind of problems do we have within the church? There's personality conflicts. What other conflicts do you have? I'm sorry? Opinions, personal opinions. That most elusive chapter in the Bible. What else do we have? And opinions on interpretation of the scriptures. I've certainly run into that more than once. There's one that's probably more important. That would be the topic of sin. Okay? Now, can opinions be sinful? Absolutely, because they can be divisive. Okay? Can personality conflicts be sinful? Absolutely. What is usually the problem with a personality conflict? One wants to be stronger than the other, or they have a personal agenda. Personal agendas are a big problem. But it says, he's saying, do not sharply rebuke an older man. Now, how old is Timothy approximately? 30, 35, somewhere in there. Fairly young man. Okay. He could have been as young as 25. I don't really know. The thing is when you go in and you're preaching in a local congregation, you typically have a lot of older men. Some of those men are doing well for themselves. Other men are not. We had a big variety of people. So we had slaves that were in the local congregations, all the way up to some officials in the Roman government were known to be in the church. So a young man coming in, and he needs to rebuke an older man. Maybe it's about doctrine. Okay. Can doctrine get us in trouble? I've been called before elders before over doctrine. It's one of the reasons why I brought this book today. Because this is a commentary on the New Testament epistles. This is by David Lipscomb, one of the men in the church in the 19th century. Very well respected, very well educated. But one of the things about what's written in this book that's interesting is some of the things that we'll be going over here. I had to make a defense of what was written here before elders. That's intimidating. Now, in this particular verse, in verse 1, it's not talking about the eldership. It says, do not rebuke an older man. And in this particular case, it's presbyteroi, and it's a dative, singular, masculine, comparative. Yeah, go figure that one. Why would you not want to sharply rebuke an older man? It says, rather appeal to him as a father. How many of you have had to deal with a parent that was not doing quite what they were supposed to do? I know I have. You know, my mom is a strong woman. She's a very opinionated person. I've had to put her in her place. Okay, how do I go about doing that? I love my mom. She's my hero. But how do I deal with that? Matter of fact, as I was going over this lesson last night, I talked to my mom about this very subject. The reason why I'm talking about my mother is because it's also talking about older women here. Remember that comparative? It's what this is all about. Appeal to him as a father, to the younger men as brothers. When we're talking about members of the church, we're supposed to be treating one another, I'd say like family, but if you come from a dysfunctional family, you don't really want to be treated like that. Seriously, you don't want, you want to be treated better than family. And for some of you have great family lives. I try to make sure that we have a great family life in my home. I work very diligently for that. But that's also what I want for the church. It's what I want for you and myself, for my family, for my son, for my friends, and for my brethren as a whole. That we can talk to one another and be able to iron out the differences that we have with each other. Younger men. I have a younger man in the audience today. Yes, I'm looking at you. Have I ever rebuked you? Why? Do you know that you're loved? Thank you, Dallin. Come a long ways. Keep doing it. It says in verse 2, and the older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters in all purity. This is one that we have to be careful of, don't we? As men in the congregation, we need to be treating our young ladies as ladies. That they should be treated in all purity. That we need to, I hear so many things in the world about things that have happened to young people in the church. When I say in the church, I don't necessarily mean in the churches of Christ, although it has happened in the churches of Christ. We need to keep the church pure. We need to keep our thoughts pure, keep our attitude among one another pure. Again, all of these things are in the comparative. What does it say about younger men compared to younger women? As brothers and sisters, that's the comparative here. What about the older men and older women? As mothers and fathers, this is the comparative that I was speaking of that you find in the Greek. This is sometimes something that's hard to read in the English. Forgive me, I don't mean to sound like I think the Greek is superior. I think it is, my personal opinion. The thing is here is sometimes you lose things. You lose the attitude. The comparative idea here is that you're comparing this to family. How do you want your family treated? This goes back to the golden rule. What does it say in James 2:8? It says the royal law. This is my favorite way of saying this. You know, treat another as you would want to be treated. Love your neighbor as yourself. These are all very important ideas. Moving on into verse 3, we kind of shift gears a little bit. It says, honor widows who are widows indeed. It says, but if any widow, what does it mean to honor, first of all? What does that mean?
Place them above yourself.
A lot of times we think placing them above ourselves, but again, referring back up to the previous two verses, how are we supposed to treat them? With respect, as family. How do you honor your older people? You treat them like family. You treat them as if they're yours to take care of in their time of need. It says, but, here's the caveat, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. Is it the church's responsibility to take care of every elder, every widow? Again, I'm going to ask, is it the church's responsibility to take care of every widow? No. Okay? We need to make sure that they are a widow indeed, in factuality, that they are actually in need, that they are destitute of any other family to depend on. If they have other family to depend on, what should we expect of that family? Take care of them. Okay? It's the family's responsibility, not necessarily the responsibility of the church. Now, this is an idea that we have often gotten away from here in the United States. We have social benefits, or have had social benefits, that will take care of us, our Social Security, and different ways of taking care of our older people. It doesn't always work. So it says that they should, that the children and grandchildren. So is it just the children's responsibility to take care of grandma? It's the children and the grandchildren. It's the whole family that is responsible. It says, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. In verse 5, now she who is a widow indeed, who has been left alone, has fixed her hope on God. Why does it say that she's fixed her hope on God? Do you remember the widow's mite? How much did she give? Everything. She gave everything. She has no other hope except what God can give her. She continues in entreaties and prayers night and day. If you've ever been in a destitute situation, you're praying for your next meal. It says in verse 6, but she who gives herself to wanton pleasure is dead even while she lives. Now, why did it change here? Because there are widows that are younger. Prescribe these things well so they may be above reproach. These widows need to be widows indeed. I've got myself a little confused. She must remain above reproach. She must be actually a widow indeed. But if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and worse than an unbeliever. How many of you have ever encountered somebody that refused to take care of their household? I see one nod. Show of hands, anyone? Come on, you can raise them high. Okay, I have. I've got one in my family. I don't call him on Father's Day. I call my mother because she's the one that was there. Okay? When I was without shoes, who put shoes on my feet? My mom did, not my dad. The thing is worse than an infidel because he refuses. Does it say that he can't refuse or that he can't take care of his household? I know what my dad made a year. Got his receipts. I know what he made a year. Made 3 times more than what my mother ever did. He worked as a machinist. He could take care of his family, but he refused. And there's a difference between can't and refusal. Have you ever met anyone who couldn't provide for his family? Oh, we know people who couldn't provide for their family. We've seen the situations. With this elevator explosion, we saw that example. Are we talking about these men? No. It says, but the one who refuses, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. We need to be able to rebuke these people. Now, I had a man years ago who came to me and he was lamenting that he couldn't find a job. I said, there's jobs everywhere. I said, have you applied? And he says, yes, but the only job I can find is at an elevator, and they want me to work on Sunday. I said, go work for the elevator. He says, but I'd be working on Sunday. It's like, so what? He says, that's the Sabbath. I said, no, it's not. Go work. Provide for your family. I had to go through a whole argument about why Sunday isn't the Sabbath. Had to show him from Scripture. You know what he ultimately did? Once I showed him the Scripture, now he got mad at me. He said I was a know-it-all. I said, thank you. Knew that would get a smile from you. I'm not a know-it-all. I don't. It's intimidating. The more you know, the more you realize you don't. The thing is the following day he went to work because it was irrefutable. Because I showed him these verses. I said, you must provide for your family, even at a sacrifice. You'll get to a point where you don't have to work on Sunday, but right now you do. He went to work, and he can be honored. In verse 9 it says, let a widow be put on the list only if she has only if she is not less than 60 years old, having been the wife of one man. How many of your Bibles say something else? Some of them say 60. What is 60? 60 years. I've had people argue that was 30 years. Faithful to her husband. Doesn't give a number. Interesting. Yes. And that is a good point because She may have been a widow twice, but it's still being a widow. Now, here's some of the other qualifications for that widow. It says, having a reputation for good works, and if she has brought up children, if she has shown hospitality to strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has assisted those in distress, and if she has devoted herself to every good work. Now, we've often talked about roles of women in the church. We're going to go into that a little bit more. But the roles of the women in the church are many and varied. But I want to ask you some things. Is it just the woman who is raising up children? It shouldn't be. Often it is. Is it just women who are known for good works? I know my wife probably does more than I do, because she has a way of finding those things that people need. She has washed the saints' feet. Now, what does this mean? Is this a hard and fast rule that we should be practicing in the church? It's a trick question here. Are we supposed to be washing the feet of the saints as part of church worship? That was a sign of hospitality. Why was it a sign of hospitality? The feet were dirty. People wore little pieces of leather on their feet when they walked for long distances. They got dirty and sweaty. This was just a common courtesy of the day. This was common decency. Assisting those in distress. Every good work. What are some of the examples of every good work? My mom and I went over this quite extensively last night. What is every good work? Joanne, I'm going to pick on you. What is every good work? You don't know? Sure you do. Christina? Yeah, I'm going to pick on you. The thing is there's so much that can be done within the church. And being able to recognize it, being observant to recognize the needs of the people around you. It could be a little thing. It can be little things. Relieve the afflicted. Always looking for a place to help. Continuously looking for a place to help. Continuously looking for a way to help your neighbor. Yes.
Not just you're keeping your eyes down, but acknowledging the cashier, acknowledging the person who cleans your building, acknowledging the people who bring stuff to your door, acknowledging even Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, since I'm a Mormon. It's not agreeing with what they say, but it's acknowledging that they're trying to do what they think is right.
Right.
It's a smile or notice.
Well, it seems to me these last three things amplify each other.
Yes.
So you begin with washing the saints' feet. It's very specific. It's not glorious. It's a humble expression of doing whatever you can for your brother or sister. And then it amplifies by saying, what I'm saying is help everybody who's in distress. So that's kind of like one level of it. It's a little bit higher, we're gaining altitude here. So very tactical, very specific, wash their feet. Do anything that helps somebody in distress. And the next level is do any good work you can find out there. Anything.
Anything.
Anything. Everything.
anything good.
Anything good. Do anything good.
One of the things about Disney World, if you go, how many of you have been to Disney World or Disneyland? I have been. Have you ever noticed how clean the grounds are? Do you know why? I know you know why, because you read the book. Do you know why the grounds are so clean? It is the responsibility of every person to clean the grounds, no matter what their position is in the company. They could be the president of Disney, and if they see a piece of trash on the ground, it is his responsibility to pick it up. It's part of their corporate culture. Every little good work.
Goes back to Jesus' example when Jeff was bringing up. Jesus had compassion on the people.
Yes.
He was always there to help them. And he even washed the disciples' feet. He took an apron and a towel and wrapped it around himself. Washed their feet. He was constantly observing where people needed help.
He was also leading by example. Again, if the president of Disney can bend down to pick up a cup off the ground and put it in the trash, what does that say about everybody else who works for Disney? It's everybody's responsibility.
If Disney can pick up trash off the ground, they can keep it off the street too.
How does this affect us in human terms? How can we make a difference with our neighbor? I'm talking about our neighbor, your next door neighbor. I'm going to be more specific. The neighbor that is immediately next to you. How can you have effectual relationship and make an effectual change in their life? Do you see things that need to be done just around the neighborhood? Do you take the time to do it? I had an interesting thing happen to me when we moved into our house on Meredith. I mow the alley. I mow the whole alley. I don't like mowing the alley, but I mow the whole alley. Do you know what happened? Everybody else started mowing the alley too. One house in the whole alley doesn't mow their alley. Still mow it. People met me and said, "Thank you. Our alley looks better." It's an alley. But there was an opportunity there to preach the gospel as well, to talk to my neighbors and get to know my neighbors and get to know my neighbors' needs. Going to get off that subject. It says, but refuse, because the original subject was widows, but refuse to put younger widows on the list, for when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married. Careful in the way you put this. It says, incurring condemnation because they have set aside their previous pledge. Younger widows. It says, when they've set aside their pledge to Christ. Wait a minute. How does this all work? How does this series of sentences, how does this whole section work? Because later on, he says, in verse 14, and this is important, so verse 11, it says, refuse to put the younger widows on a list. Okay. But then it says in verse 14, therefore I want younger widows to get married, bearing children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach. So what did marriage have to do with this? One, it's using the whole purpose of this is to use the church's resources wisely. That is correct. But what about this idea of this previous pledge? This is a complicated verse here. Far more complicated than it appears.
Mine says their physical desires will overpower their devotion to Christ.
Okay. So, again, what about the pledge? Their devotion to Christ, you're supposed to serve Christ when? Or when are you supposed to serve God? How are you supposed to serve God? I'm going to pick on you, Jeff, because you know this one by heart. How are you supposed to serve God? Okay. With your all in all, right? Does your body need food? Your body have desires? Yes. The thing is it's talking about sensual desires here, but also this previous pledge. What is the pledge that he's talking about? This is a cultural thing. This isn't a biblical thing. This is cultural. It's like, oh, my husband has died, and now I'm going to devote my whole life to Christ. Okay, can you devote your whole life to Christ and be married? Don't give me that, Jeff. You know the facts. Yes. Okay. What marriage is supposed to be is that you are amplifying your ability to serve God. There were a lot of things that people would pledge in those days. One of those is that I will devote my life to Christ. Well, in this case, Paul is saying, younger widows, get married, bear children, keep house, give the enemy no occasion for reproach. Because what happens when you have a young woman who is unmarried? I'm talking worldly sense here, okay? What happens? This is young men too. You know, our younger men, younger women, they get approached. Remember what we were talking about earlier when it said to younger women as sisters in all purity. Again, this all works together. She's not to be, not to make a pledge that she can't keep. She's also supposed to, she should get married, provided that is an opportunity. Now, verse 13, this is one of the problems that you have with idle widows. Widows who may have no need, who may have no need to work if they're on the church's purse strings. It says, and at the same time they also learn to be idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things that are not proper. Now in italics here, I have it says, not proper to mention. That to mention isn't in the Bible. Okay? I have New American Standard. It's in italics because it's not there. Things that are not proper. What is the problem with gossip?
You and I can sit around and hear the same story, and when we repeat it, it's never the same as what the original was.
Stories get twisted. The facts get lost.
It's not even necessary to repeat factual
Exactly. And why be a busybody? You know, it's busy going here and there, talking to people about things that they probably shouldn't be talking about. Rather than loving one another, perhaps they're putting one another down. But it's important for us to remember what's going on here. But the younger widows, they're not supposed to be put on the list for church benevolence unless they absolutely need some form of help. Okay? It's not saying never. This is saying not permanently. This isn't a permanent income for them. The older widows, yes. Permanent income. Younger women, no. It says, so there's no occasion for reproach. It says in verse 15, for some have already turned aside to follow Satan. It says, if any woman who is a believer and has dependent widows, let her assist them, and let not the church be burdened, so that it may assist those who are widows indeed. This is where I'm going to stop, because my next section gets even deeper. The church benevolence, I don't know how much the church, I should know, but, because I get the paper every year. There is a number for church benevolence that we give to people. And that's an important work of the church. But if every little thing gets the benevolence, where will the church be in 5 years? Or a year? The whole purpose is that we take care of one another, and the whole purpose is that we take care of our families. Is it always easy? No. Are there things that come up? Yes. And are those things worthy of benevolence? Yes, they are. It can be hard. So that's where we'll stop. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Perfect. Thank you all very much for your time and for your patience.